Welcome to Talmudic Treasures. Today we're learning Sotah, page 3, which discusses a very fascinating concept that we learn out from here to all cases of sin. When it comes to the Sotahs we've been learning, it's when the husband suspects his wife of immorality. And because of that, he warns her, I do not want you to seclude yourself with such and such a man. And it was even done, according to some opinions, with witnesses. And she still secluded herself with this man, and possibly with two or maybe one witness that saw this, but no one knows for sure what happened. So that is where we have the laws of the Sotah. She goes to the temple, she's presented before the Kohen, and the Kohen is able to determine through a particular test, which we'll discuss in a future page, whether she's innocent and therefore can go back to her husband, or she's not innocent and she would not be able to go back to her husband as well as receive punishment. Now, it's brought down when it comes to the law of a Sotah. It says the verse that a man kisiste, which literally, when we read that word, it sounds a lot like the word shota. A shota is someone who unfortunately does not have the proper ability to think. Someone who is mentally deranged. In fact, as is discussed in Tractate Chagiga, that they are someone who would not really understand what to do with money. If you give them something of value, they will lose whatever you give them, which is an interesting definition because it actually is going to play very much into this particular page, as I'll share with you in a moment. We learn out, because it says this word, and it sounds so much like the word shota, someone who is crazy or mentally deranged, the Talmud tells us the famous expression, and I'll read it first in Hebrew and then translate. Ein adam over avera. A person will not commit any sin, will not do anything negative or wrong, el im kein nichnas bo ruach shtos, unless they have in them this element of craziness within their own minds. And this again is derived from the Sotah. But why? Because if we look at this woman, we could assume possibly that she lived in somewhat harmonious relationship. She is married with a man who perhaps is a decent person. And he asked her, please do not be with another man. I do not want you to commit adultery. It's improper for you to even put yourself in a situation where it may end up happening by secluding yourself. Let's create some boundaries in our relationship. And she did it anyway, which means that let's say she actually sinned and she was to commit adultery. Now let's think about the reward versus the risk factor. When it comes to life, one should always make that assessment. And if you have a proper frame of mind, you would say, this makes no sense. You're someone who is in a relationship, maybe you have children, you have a house, you have all these things going for you, and you're willing to risk all that to have an affair with some person who may not really care about you, may not be so invested in you, just for this small moment of enjoyment or pleasure. It doesn't make sense. And therefore the Talmud says this is insanity. If you really think about it, a person should not engage in self-destructive behavior. And the only reason why a person will do that is because they're not thinking straight. But if a person would spend a moment and say, what I'm about to do makes no sense, you're not going to do it. Which is the reason why someone who is considered mentally deranged is defined as you have something of value and you throw it away. And that's what happens with this woman who secludes herself, who possibly commits adultery, and anyone who is engaged in any behavior which is not within their best interests. You're not thinking straight. And therefore the Torah tells us that before we act, we need to think.